Euh, Est-ce que tu crois que le gouvernement devrait faire plus pour que le transfert des compétences et des qualifications ait la même valeur ici que partout dans le monde lorsqu'une personne titulaire d'un permis ou qualifiée dans un pays étranger peut apporter ses qualifications et ses compétences au Canada et rejoindre le marché du travail?
Oui, très bonne question, Ryan. En fait, oui, c'est certain que oui. Actuellement, il y a beaucoup de défis. Pour exemple, des ingénieurs qui peut venir au Canada pour avoir l'équivalence. Alors là, ils rentrent ici, puis comme je dis, un machine, c'est un machine. Si c'est à Colombie ou Mexique, Brésil, etc., c'est la même affaire. Les lois sont différentes, c'est clair. OK? Au Québec, en Ontario, il y a des lois en particulier qui doivent suivre, connaître, étudier, etc. Il y a certains programmes qui existent, ils les appellent des bridging programs qui peuvent prendre des cours pour être capable de travailler comme ingénieur au Canada, mais c'est pas facile. Et on le voit aussi dans le secteur de santé, très difficile pour des infirmières, ils débutent comme des préposés, des bénéficiaires aux préposés, c'est des PSW. Au lieu d'être un infirmière, un humain, c'est un humain. Les corps ne changent pas, mais il n'y a pas d'équivalence. Alors, c'est certain que le gouvernement essaie de faire des choses pour avancer la rapidité, pour être capable d'avoir une équivalence, mais c'est encore pas facile. On le voit la même chose avec les électriciens, des mécaniciens qui veulent avoir des Red Seal ou des licenciés au Québec. C'est très dur. Et aujourd'hui, on voit certaines difficultés aussi parce qu'il y a certains syndicats qui veulent que les gars ou les travailleuses aient ces qualifications-là et c'est pas facile. So Ryan's question was, do I think the government should be doing more to help with the equivalency of the qualifications that people have when they come into Canada, whether it be engineers or electricians, millwrights, etc.? My answer is yes. Of course, they should be trying to do more to help speed it up. Okay, so there are programs that exist. There's bridging programs for engineers. They can go study in Toronto at university or at the college level, do a couple of courses to upgrade and to get their equivalency. I do think it's important, okay, because there are rules and regulations in Ontario and Quebec that are different than they would be in Mexico or Colombia or Brazil, for example. But it needs to be streamlined to be a lot faster. And we see this a lot with electricians, with millwrights, with heavy equipment mechanics, plumbers is like super hard to do. People have the qualifications to do the work. So sometimes employers will hire them and then as apprentices, and then they can transition up. But I do believe for sure the government can do more to help expedite the process. Because that's what we have to do at Ivy. We have to market now the opportunities that we have here. So at first we're like, wow, how are we going to do this? Like we have a client up in White River, Hornpain, super, super remote. And it's like, wow, how are we going to tell people from like Ukraine that they're going up here? Like there's like a couple thousand people that live there. Surprisingly, they are excited because it gives them an opportunity to save money because the cost of living is a lot lower. Okay. So we do business in Toronto, we do business in Montreal, but it's very, very, very expensive. So when people are coming in, they're making, $22, $24 an hour, let's say, in a bigger city, while their quality of life is going to be a lot different than if they were making that money up in a more of a remote community, right? And as I said during my presentation, a lot of the employers in the resource sector are in the smaller communities, okay? They're in northern parts of Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba, BC, Alberta, etc., which gives them that opportunity, right? So we've also seen that we're able to find people outside of Canada that have specific experience in the industry already, okay, which is pretty neat. So they want to stay in the industry, especially mining. Like if we're bringing people in from Peru, for example, they're working for Barrick, they're working for Canadian companies already, the Dominican also. So yeah, it's still a hard sell sometimes because it's very remote and it's cold. That's another thing. Those areas are very, very cold. So people from Mexico are like, whoa, like minus 20 or 30 is like crazy. But it works. So far, it's good. I mean, I think it's twofold. Like the federal government is creating programs that help to facilitate the entry. And when I said like the question about, is there going to be a worldwide shortage on talent? There's countries that are making things a heck of a lot easier than Canada to bring people in. Okay. The Canadian government, I work with the Forest Products Association of Canada. I'm kind of like an unofficial partner because I talk to them a lot about immigration, and I know they're doing a ton of lobbying, and I support it 100%. And they had an employer group that recently was lobbying, and I gave a lot of feedback to FPAC on some of the changes that I thought they should implement. Some were implemented, some weren't. But they just announced, for example, when workers were coming into Canada, they were getting only a 2-year work permit, and then they had to renew it or apply for permanent status. Most couldn't get permanent status right away. The employers had to start all over again. Well, now it's issued for 3 years, which is super awesome. The other thing in particular for the forest product sector was that if someone was making less than $24 per hour, then the employer could only hire 10% of their workforce. So if they had 100 workers, they could only hire 10 of those people because they were making less than $24 an hour. Well, some employers needed 20. They weren't allowed to do it. So one of the things we lobbied for was a higher percentage, and they did accept it. Okay, so that was really good. So the government has a role to play on the programs that help to facilitate entry, and also the programs that help to facilitate them to stay, to remain permanent after. Okay, now when we talk to employers, our screening process is very strict because employers have an opportunity to sell themselves as well as a company, but they also have an opportunity to facilitate the process of coming to Canada, because it's not always easy and it's expensive to pay for flights and accommodations. And sometimes landlords are like, well, they don't have any credit history in Canada, so I'm not going to rent to them. So, we share best practices with employers too, where it's like, hey, if you pay their flights, you pay first and last month's rent, help them get their feet on the ground, and really help to facilitate the entry, that will make our job easier to market the opportunity. Because if, now what we're seeing is, candidates outside of Canada are talking to more than one employer or more than one, international recruiter like Ivy Group. So, we need to be able to sell. And we do videos too, we'll send in our videographer and he'll do videos of their facilities, and we really try to market it because we have to, because it's getting more competitive. So yeah, to incentivize people to come, it's twofold. Definitely government has a role to play, and so do the employers.
I'm going to ask one more question in French.
Sure.
So, quels sont vos conseils sur les étudiants internationaux qui cherchent à travailler au Canada à l'avenir et les opportunités ou les cheminements carrière qu'il peut soutenir?
Oui, en fait, il y a beaucoup de difficultés pour des étudiants à l'international ou qui sont au Canada, mais sont des gens de l'international, d'avoir des mêmes opportunités que des Canadiens. Puis j'ai participé à beaucoup de conférences à Toronto, puis j'ai jasé avec beaucoup d'étudiants, bonne qualification, mais il y a beaucoup de misère de sécuriser un bon emploi quand ils sont finis, même s'il y a des compétences nécessaires pour faire la job. Je vais dire des vraies choses, OK? Exemple, on a parlé avec certains étudiants que moi, je n'étais pas capable de prononcer leur nom parce que c'était écrit d'une façon que je n'étais pas capable vraiment. Alors, il dit, ben oui, mais c'est mon nom. J'ai dit, fine, mais veux-tu avoir un job au Canada? Oui ou non? Oui, OK, fine. Pense à changer ton nom, exemple, sur ton CV pour que des gens ne soient pas inquiets ou nerveux parce que les Canadiens sont super ultra gentils. Moi, j'étais un des DRH, le directeur des ressources humaines, que des fois, j'étais gêné un peu d'appeler certaines personnes que je n'étais pas capable de prononcer leur nom. Je ne savais pas si c'était un gars ou une femme, ou j'avais aucune idée. Alors, c'est un exemple, OK? L'autre chose, c'est de prendre des opportunités de faire du networking avec le plus de monde possible. Parce que quand tu es capable et pendant la période de COVID, c'était ultra difficile parce que ces conférences ou événements n'existaient pas. Mais c'est ultra important parce que si tu es capable d'avoir une référence ou un point de contact dans l'industrie, ça va t'aider beaucoup. Okay? So Ryan asked me, for international students that are in Canada that are looking for work, what are some of the tricks or hints or guidelines I can give to them for finding work? One of the things that I said was when I was working as an HR manager, I was kind of shy. Canadian people are nice, right? So you don't want to call somebody and be like, hey, can I speak to you? I don't know how to pronounce your name. So they feel bad, right? And I was one of those people. So legitimately, when I talk to international students, and I'm like, hey, what's your name? And I'm like, I didn't really catch it because it was different. Or show me your CV and I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm like, one thing is like, change your name, like make it simple, like Steve or Ryan or Hannah or whatever. Just make it so people can pronounce it and they don't feel nervous. And it's not bad. It's not changing who you are as a person. And the other thing I tell them is network. Talk to as many people as you can, go to as many events as you can, and just participate and be seen, and try to get a referral or a reference or from someone who's in the industry that has credibility that can do it. And people are nice and they'll do it. I've done it many, many, many times. And you can also work with a recruiter too. I mean, we have a lot of international students reaching out to us, and we're able to help sell the person. We do the interviews, we have credibility, and it helps to soften the approach. So there's a couple of things there that I think would be beneficial.
Yeah, that's really interesting for sure. And I know we've been contacted actually by a lot of international students. So I'm hoping they tune into this one.
Yeah.
You had mentioned earlier that the birth rate is dropping in Canada. Can you give us maybe an idea as to why that's happening? Is it like cost of life related, or is it because people are just choosing to not have children? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, so that's a question that I get often. Sometimes people don't like my answer, but this is my opinion. And there's a lot of different reasons, okay? Lifestyle is one, where it's like, I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to have kids. I like it. I'm independent. I want to work. I want to make money. I want to go on trips. I don't have to deal with it, okay? Lifestyle is one. Cost of living, you mentioned it, Perry, absolutely 100%. The federal government now has agreements with all provinces and territories for $10 daycare. I think that will definitely make a difference. And the government, again, they're smart, okay? Why do you think they did that? Because they know our population is decreasing along with the birth rate. They need people to pay taxes. Okay, that's why they're doing it. And they're thinking long game, because if more people are having kids, can afford to put them in daycare, well, then the more kids they have, the more taxpayers they have. Very political answer, but that's the truth. Okay. The other part of it is, comes down to choice again. But I've seen it, the more, and this is where it gets controversial. I'm just being honest. Okay. More and more women are coming into the workplace. Okay. They are getting focused on their career, their life. And listen, I don't have kids. My wife and I decided, hey, we want to like focus on our careers. That's what we did. Will I be a dad? Maybe, I don't know, someday. But I'm one of those stats too, where I'm not supporting the growth of Canada's, population at all. But you know what? It was a choice me and my wife made, where it's like, we want to focus on our careers. She immigrated to Canada too. Not too, but she immigrated to Canada. And she had it harder at the beginning, so it's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to be educated. I'm going to become a CPA, like an accountant. I want to work in finance. She did. It took a longer time to do that. Even though she was educated outside of Canada, it comes back to the credential recognition. She started at 0, 4 years of school here again. But she did it. And then it's like, fine, I did it. But now I want to work because I've studied all these things. And we see this with women that haven't immigrated too, where it's like, you know what, I went to university 4 years, or maybe I studied a master's for another 1 or 2, and I want to work and make money and grow and stuff. And then your priorities change, right? Because you get used to this, lifestyle of it's just me, or just me and my boyfriend, or just me and my husband, or whatever. That's okay. But those are the things that I think are really contributing to it. Sometimes people will argue with me saying, well, yeah, but it's because the employers aren't paying enough money, so they can't afford to have childcare or whatever. But I think a lot of it is voluntary choice in a way, where, you prioritize other things. And sometimes it's involuntary, where it's like, hey, I really, really would love to have children and a family, but like, I can't afford it. So, some of the incentives the government's putting in place now, I think are good. I think it will help the birth rate, at least to stabilize it, because it's been declining for the past 5 years, like year over year. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really intriguing for sure. It seems like a lot of those options are just more available to like the average Joe nowadays. And the feminist in me is quite happy about that.
Yeah.
We'll round this out with a final question about natural resources.
Sure.
Do you see a lack of specialists in resource sectors specifically? Is this an opportunity that maybe young Canadians could take advantage of?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the positions in the industry are specialized. Okay. And I did this for a long time. I worked in the industry for 15 years, and it was like, we need like paper maker people or paper machine people. And, one of the reasons that I got pushed out was because like the recruitment part of my job was getting super toxic, because these people don't exist. So what do? We use the term in HR is we poach. So we'll call Resolute, we'll call like all these other companies, and we'll like poach their people. And I'm like, man, this is super toxic, because all we're doing is like pulling people and doing all this stuff. And then like the HR guy that I know over there, he's like mad at me. He's like, man, what the heck? Why are you stealing my guy and like, or my girl, whatever. And I'm like, wow, this is like really bad, because that's all it was doing was this, right? But like, there's no school where you learn to be a high-end paper maker. You know what I mean? There's some courses you can take on that, but a lot of it is through experience, right? I seen it in like, I hired a lot of junior process engineers, for example, where they would just be on the machine with the senior like technical manager or whatever, and they would learn. And it takes a long time because the industry is so technical. Mining is the same. You know, there's mining engineering programs at university. There's no like, I mean, there's more like for the harvesting side, you can go to school for that, but there's not like a paper maker university program, you know? So it depends which sector. And if you're interested in mining, I mean, Laurentian University had a great program up in Sudbury. There's other schools that have the same that I think would be really beneficial to get that core foundation of, you know, what does that look like? So yeah, there's definitely a gap, honestly. But when I come back to your purpose, I think it's important that you can try to identify with it as early as you can, because it's a big investment to learn about the industries. Like and you hear about, oh, I'm a lifer in pulp and paper, I'm a lifer in forestry or mining. And it's true, because you get addicted because you're learning all the time, always. It's never just like it goes smooth. There's always something that happens because the processes are complicated, and there's always opportunities to make things safer or better or faster or more efficient, or, you know, control emissions better. Or, you know, now it's the big thing is like battery electric vehicles, like BEVs and mining. That's huge. Will that ever go into forestry? I don't know, maybe. You know, there's no oil spills in the forest. Like, I don't know, maybe there could be an opportunity to study more about that and the sustainability through this conversion to more, you know, electric vehicle stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. And we're all just so fortunate, I think, to be part of such dynamic industries where things are always changing and there's always opportunity to reinvent the industry and also reinvent oneself in that process as well.
100%.
Okay, I think that about wraps us up for today. We're out of time. Thank you so much, Anthony, for sharing your time and your experience with us. We really, really appreciate that.
Of course, absolutely. It was my pleasure. And if there's any questions, follow-ups after, don't feel you feel open to send me an email. If there's others that are viewing this later on, I'd be more than happy to respond.